So with all of that said, let's get the conversation going, and I'm going to bring Kate in now, so just bear with me. Let's see.
Hi.
Hi, Kate. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well. And I must say, your picture looks really clear. We were worried because you're in a remote location right now, right?
I am. And so we were looking a little blurry, but so I'm glad. And you're very crystal clear. So thanks so much for having me to talk about the film.
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing us to show the film. And I just would say, if you're watching and it does become blurry, you can just listen to us like a podcast. So maybe this is Kate and I's first podcasting venture.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, thank you so much for showing us an incredible film. After watching it, I thought Andre Leontally is what fashion should be and what I want it to be, but it's kind of hard to put into words why that is. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to make a film about Andre Leontally?
I mean, I think that I had seen Andre in sort of fashion documentary after fashion documentary for probably like 20 years. And sort of like documentaries that there had never been a film about him. I guess that was the idea behind it. And I actually had gone to help promote the movie First Monday in May, which, like I said, was about the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And there was a young man in the audience who stood up and he didn't have a question. He just sort of was very emotional. And he said to Andre, you know, I moved to New York to study fashion. My parents don't think that what I do is real, but I know that it is because I saw you do it. And that's why I had the courage to come here and do it. So um, it was just like, yeah, that was just this light bulb moment of like, why is there not a film about this man? So that was sort of the beginning.
That's an interesting anecdote and actually leads into my next question that I wanted to ask. I originally saw the film when it premiered here in Toronto, and the audiences absolutely loved it. And during the Q&A that I watched later on, Andre was so adamant to make sure that people who are in the audience could ask questions. Um, what other kinds of responses did you hear from audience members after they watched the film?
I mean, I think that like I'm just remembering some of the people who would come up to Andre after screenings, and one man came up and said, really was gushing, and he said, "You're the Barack Obama of culture. You
Love that.
so much, really like sort of what the gentleman in New York had said. So many people really saying that I went into this business because I saw you do it. So there was a lot of that, but it's like doing screenings with him, it almost as if you're at an appearance with the Pope for the audience that would come to see the film, and frequently they had like dressed for the occasion and Andre would always ask people to come down and kind of do a turn, and he always had something to say about what they were wearing and some sort of reference grounded in history. And I think it was like actually an emotional experience for a lot of people to meet him.
Hmm. So he would actually bring audience members up and basically give them fashion advice right there live.
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
Oh,
I mean
wow.
we did a screening at Brown, which is his alma mater. It's where he got his master's degree, and he invited some of the people who came down who were especially sort of well turned out. He invited them to come to this big party that was going on in New York the following weekend, and he really has this like generosity of spirit, and he is genuinely like he's really moved actually by not fashion as much as really individual style, you know, style that so clearly comes from a place that is personal and that relates to one's autobiography. And, you know, that was just such, it was a real communal experience to go and to show the movie. I mean, I love doing Instagram Live also, but just being in the space with him with this
Mhm.
film was really pretty amazing.
I mean, that charisma of Andre Leontally is so sort of unmatched, and you can see it in so many of his famous friends and colleagues that you included in the film. People like Marc Jacobs, Valentino, Fran Lebowitz, Tom Ford, and of course, Anna Wintour. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like interviewing all of them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I had mentioned that one of the reasons that I wanted to do with the film was that I had seen Andre sort of waxing poetic about so many of the figures who you just mentioned. And I think that a lot of them are people who care about him very deeply and who respect him a lot. And I think that they were actually excited to have the chance to talk about him. I know I feel like a documentary filmmaker is supposed to sort of brag that everyone was such a hard get, and it was hard to coordinate people's schedules, but I actually do
Mhm.
think that people were excited to talk about Andre. And you know, I think that even in cases where some of them weren't sure what Andre would or wouldn't want them to say, that he always was very much like say anything you want, like say whatever you think. And uh you know, but it also was a you know, so many of them are so impressive in their own right, and it really gave me a taste, and I hope it comes through in the film, of the sort of creative circles in which he traveled. I mean, fashion obviously is a business. Obviously, there can be big egos and there can be, you know, the sort of stereotypes we all have about fashion, which there's, of course, some truth in it. But I also was very impressed with so much of the, you know, creativity, whether it was like Norma Kamali's sort of amazing, or Fran Lebowitz, and people who really have been in the New York fashion world for decades. And so that was really interesting.
Do you find that he has sort of a magnetic personality, or is it that he's interested in other people?
I think it's both. I mean, I
It's both.
think that he is incredibly generous. I mean, even when I was making the film, like he heard my kids were learning piano and he would want me to email him videos of them learning songs that he loved. I think that he's very generous with students who he meets. I think that he is incredibly magnetic. He's the sort of like the master of the like, you know, the great quip, the great one-liner. He's incredibly funny. He's also really interesting to me, and this was something that was really important to me to capture in the film, that he really like there's a performative aspect of him, and I think the humor and the larger than life Andre is who he is, but it's also partially a performance. And I think that like the ease with which he can go
Mhm.
from the sort of quiet, contemplative man on his porch, like, you know, just really thinking about life or listening to the rabbits in his yard, which he loves to do, is a really important part of his character also. And I think that that movement between larger than life, big Andre, and that sort of quiet, thoughtful, restorative person that he is a really important part of him, and is also, I think, probably what has helped to sustain him in a really difficult business, and a business that is rooted in white supremacy in many ways. And So I hope that that comes through in the film also.
Well, absolutely. And I wanted to ask because he does speak in the film about how his incredible clothes are this armor to protect him from the world, right? And if anyone's watching and they don't know who Andre Leontally is, I encourage you to Google him and look at his incredible outfits, these beautiful caftans and all these ornate, amazing robes. But and he also seems like such an open person. He's so expressive. He's such a wonderful storyteller. Was it easy for him to open up to you when you were making the film, or did you feel like he was hiding under his robes?
I think that it was easy for him to sort of like, he's naturally a raconteur. Like he will sit down and like just start telling stories. I think that for him to talk about the pain of never having, been in love and not having, a romantic life partner, or the pain of having, had to internalize so much racism over the years, that took a while, and it was something that he hadn't really spoken about before. So in some ways it was both. And, the stories are so wonderful, but I also like from the very first meeting with him, like we went to lunch, and I had said to him, like, I want that like Andre that we know and love, but I also want to go to your home in North Carolina. I want to hear about your childhood, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to hopefully try to like, get into another side of yourself that's more private. And so I was really clear about that from the beginning. So he kind of like knew it was coming, but so
Right.
we were supposed to go to North Carolina where he grew up pretty early on in the process, and he kept kind of delaying, and he's really afraid of snakes. And there are actually snakes in North Carolina, but like in the woods where he was baptized, I always really wanted to go see where he had been baptized, which is behind his childhood church. And, it is in the film, but he kept saying that we couldn't go because, there might be snakes, and he kind of kept putting it off. But then finally, it was like, Andre, come on, like the snakes, they're not there anymore. It's like, I can't remember if it was like too cold for the snakes. And so finally we did go, in December. But, I think it was like hard for him. And the first time that we went to his grandmother's house, which is in North Carolina, his grandmother raised him. For those of you who haven't seen the film, he like I had actually like flown down with my cinematographer, and specifically to film Andre in his grandmother's house, and we went, and he just was like, I am so sorry, but I can't do this. And he kind of broke down a little bit. And then we went back a couple of days later, and there's a shot in the film where it's in his grandmother's house, and he's kind of like, it's a profile shot.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways it's a little bit of an awkward shot, but I ended up sort of liking it because it really communicates how difficult it was for him, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, his relationship with his grandmother is so beautiful to me. Um, and one of the things that he mentions throughout the film that she taught him was the importance of this everyday luxury, and how dressing well is sort of this moral imperative. Um, I was curious, did being around him influence the way you dressed? And and do you carry his fashion philosophy with you now?
So it's so funny. So I'm not actually right now, I guess, but I almost have a uniform of wearing like a white men's button-down shirt, and I usually wear some kind of jeans. And in moments when he would be really annoyed with me, which definitely happened, and he can be very acerbic in those moments, would sort of be like, you dress like Robin Hood, and, it would be sort of painful.
Mm.
Um, but I think that I don't dress over the top, and I don't like wear, I, my style doesn't look at all like his style, but I do think that I dress in a way that I feel like expresses who I am and that I feel really comfortable with. And I also have a real appreciation of beautifully made things. And I value fashion as a way to express oneself. So I think in that way, I probably share his sensibility, if not his like aesthetic, I guess I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he couldn't rub off on someone. Even after watching the film for this Q&A, I thought I would wear this dress because as an ode to him because I couldn't just wear my navy t-shirt. I just felt so wrong. But this is a fashion film, and I know that your producing partner also made another fashion film. Um, why do you think that fashion is an important piece of our society worth examining?
I mean, I think that fashion is a form of expression. I think that we live in a culture that really values verbal expression.
Mm,
The person who like, puts themselves out there is sort of like we hold that on a pedestal in our
mhm,
culture. I suppose written communication is second to that. But I think that like aesthetic communication is really, besides being able to be beautiful, that it can affect change and it
mhm,
can allow, like in the case of Andre, like it was a way for him to sort of transcend the environment in which he grew up. And in
mhm,
some way, that's like if the film is about one thing, is it's about like how his love for fashion and this form of communication and expression enabled him to like find his way in the world and really become who he wanted to be. And I believe that fashion can be that. I think it oftentimes is a way of making people feel bad about themselves in order to sell stuff, to be totally honest. Like a lot of times, like women's fashion magazines can be more about that, like you should look thinner, or you should look this, or you should look
mhm.
that. Um, but it doesn't have to be that. And I think that for Andre, it is about that sort of like that higher calling of fashion. I feel like he's like the apotheosis of that to me.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Um, and I think that that message really comes through during the film. I did want to ask, I mean, I liked that the film didn't focus solely on this because, um, well, he's one of, if not the only black man at the time in high-end fashion, the fashion industry for so long. I mean, in the 1970s, which I can only imagine because it can be really difficult and very trying at times um, in that industry, even now as a black creative. And he opens up a little bit about the racism that he experienced during his career, which is clearly only one part of his incredibly expansive career, but very hurtful nonetheless. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like witnessing him open up about that?
Yeah. I mean, that was something that was really important, I thought to, and I think he thought, to kind of consider in the film. And um, there's a scene in the movie where he goes back to the Condé Nast, and when I say go back, because he had worked there in house and was more working for them in more of a like consulting editor type of role. But so he goes back to the Condé Nast archive and he's looking at issues of Vogue magazine from that he has known and loved either as a 12-year-old boy in North Carolina reading them, or as a young up and coming editor at Vogue in the 80s when he started at Vogue, or
Mhm,
leading all the way up to the Michelle Obama cover in 2008, which he wrote, the first Michelle Obama cover. um, and I thought that it would be a really like rich, interesting day in the archive, because we were really looked at like a lot of his work. I didn't think it would be the day that he really broke down.
mhm,
But he is, anyone who hasn't seen the film, like he's there in his big, he always wears this big red Norma Kamali sleeping bag jacket, and he's inside in the Vogue archive wearing these white gloves, which you have to wear, in order to handle the old magazines. And he looks at the Michelle Obama cover and he is just so moved. And he says, I wish my grandmother had been around to see this. And he sort of starts to think back to what he has witnessed over the years growing up. And he starts to cry and he sort of wipes a tear away with the white glove. And it was, I don't remember exactly what month that happened, but the movie was filmed mainly over the course of the fall of 2016, like summer and fall of 2016, leading up to the 2016
Mm.
presidential election. So when I started filming with him, he talked a lot about how like the world has come so far since he was a boy with his grandmother, living in the Jim Crow South. And then as we kind of inched toward November and into the fall and certainly into November, it kind of like there was this real shift, because the Trump campaign, became so much uglier and uglier. And so I think that for him to then see that Michelle Obama cover, it was just like, the sort of stars colliding in the most devastating way. And anyway, I didn't expect it to happen in the Vogue archive, but it
Right.
did, and it was painful to watch, you know, from behind the camera. But I was glad that we sort of went there in the
Mhm.
film. And I think it was a difficult but probably important moment for him within the course of like making the movie, from his point of view also, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, given where we are right now with the U.S. election, have you spoken to him recently at all? How's he doing?
Yeah, I mean, he and I are in touch and I check in on him. I mean, he's also over 70 during COVID. And so I'm like concerned for him in
Right.
that way. And um, I think that he is a total cable news junkie and I'm sure is like torturing himself watching so much. Like, I wish he would sometimes turn it off. But, I think he talks a lot about the pandemic of coronavirus and the pandemic of racism.
Mm.
And, you know, uh, I don't think it's sort of new information or new knowledge on his part, but he's seeing other people maybe wake up to it more.
Right. So Andre Leontally has come out with a new book this
Yeah,
year. Have you read the book?
I have read the book.
I haven't read it yet, but it feels like a bit of like a Truman Capote. I know he loves Truman Capote kind of uh, moment in a way.
Yeah. So he wrote a book, and he's very, I mean, it's a beautiful book. It's funny because there's certain things that have been picked up on about it in the press that to me are like not the most important parts of the book, but
Mm.
he is very critical of Anna Wintour in the book. He's very critical of sort of Vogue and what it was like to be a black man working at Vogue.
Mhm.
You know, he talks about like the crappy pay he got doing the Vogue podcast. He got like paid $500 an episode, which like, after the career that he has lived is
Mhm.
insane.
Mhm.
And talks a lot about his childhood. There's some overlap with the film, but there are also like other parts of him that are opened up in the book. He talks about abuse, sexual abuse he suffered as a boy.
Mhm.
And you know, which like that has gotten less attention, but it's like as someone who really cares about him, that's was really kind of devastating to read.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's like full Andre. It's wonderful. The book is so great. It became a bestseller, which is, I'm so happy for him. And, he's a great writer. And I think some of
Yeah.
his writing is in the film, and he reads some of his writing in the film, because he has a beautiful spoken voice, obviously, but his writing is terrific as well. So I would encourage everyone to read the book if you haven't. It's great.
Absolutely. I actually just ordered it. It looks
Oh, nice.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, was there anything that you wished you could have included in the film, but it just didn't make the cut? I know with documentary editing, sometimes things just have to be cut out for the sake of time.
Yeah. I guess that, well, Fran Lebowitz, I loved in the film, and there was so much more good stuff with her, but I just
That's so
like
cool.
didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole.
Mm.
And then we considered there's some interaction between Andre and the camera during the course of filming where he kind of is like doesn't want the camera too close or
Mhm.
doesn't want me sitting too close. And I had thought about including that, and that's something like that I think could have been interesting, but like just in terms of the relationship between um, the filmmaker and him,
Mhm.
and his willingness or openness to revealing himself, could have been this like through line. But I and then he's just like so funny. I mean, there's so many funny lines from him.
Mhm.
I love like he and Ebony Marshall Turman, who had been was the assistant minister at Abyssinian Baptist Church, which he used to go to in Harlem. There's like a scene with her and this designer Andre Walker that is in the film, but there was so much good stuff from that, and they're just like him having fun with his friends is so great to watch, and they're so funny together. So maybe a little more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how tough it would have been to cut any footage of this amazing man out of a film. I mean, he's just so wonderful.
Actually,
Um,
there's one scene that we cut at the very, very end, which is he goes to Tom Ford to be fitted for the cape that he's going to wear to the Met Gala. And he's lost about 30 pounds, so they have to bring it in. But he wants the train to be like, I think they made it 4 feet long, and he wants it to be like 8 feet long. And he's like, longer, longer. And it's like the tailor at Tom Ford is like, really? Longer? And it's just this great, perfect Andre moment. But I think it's in the DVD extras.
oh, I wish I could see that. So we're nearing the end of our time, but I did want to ask, having spent so much time with such an incredible icon, are there any lessons that you took with you from this experience, from spending so much time with Andre, that we can take with us as well?
Yeah. Um, I guess that like to leave on a sort of upbeat note, there's a line he has in the film where he says you have to see the world with the kaleidoscope eyes of a child. And I think he lives genuinely actually lives that way. And I try to remind myself of that sometimes. So I think that's a good one maybe to end on.
That's beautiful. I love that. So for anyone who's watching, now is the time where we're going to do a trivia question. And if you get the trivia question correct, if you comment it correctly in the comments below, if you're the first person, then you will be the new proud owner of an LG Velvet 5G phone. Um, and Kate, I've been saying this every time, but you probably have an unfair advantage, okay? So you can't
I
answer.
won't say anything.
Okay. So here's the trivia question. For those who are watching, which second language does Andre Leontally speak? So if you can comment it below and you're the first one, and generally it's the first person who's the fastest at Googling. We can also, um, oh, we got it. Yes. So someone has got the correct answer. The correct answer is French. He did a bachelor's degree in French at North Carolina Central University, went on to do a master's degree in French literature at Brown, and is fluent in the language. So, to the person who won, you're the new proud owner, and we'll message you within 24 hours. That is the end of our time tonight. If you're looking for a wonderful film to watch about a style icon that will inspire you to be a better person and truer to who you are, absolutely check out The Gospel According to André. It's viewable for free on the Hot Docs at Home website, and the series is up until September 4th, so don't miss your chance to watch Kate's wonderful film. Thank you so much, Kate, for taking the time to talk to
Thank
us.
you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in. It was fun to talk, Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.